Thank you. Welcome to the castle. So this is a 125-year-old residence, once deemed to be the finest residence in Troy, pretty much at the height of the wealth of Troy. So we're holding a series of talks by Don Rittner, who's a very well-known local historian, give a number of different historical performances. I want to give you a little bit of background in the place you're standing. So how many people, first of all, have been here before? Is this the first? Okay, so about half of you have been here before. Okay, so believe it or not, this was owned by a wealthy financier for a while. It was owned by a bachelor, and then it was owned actually as an administrative building for Russell Sage College for a little while. And actually, the longest, or the residence that this was used for the longest period of time was a fraternity house. So about 70 years it was used as a fraternity. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've basically turned it into basically a place where anybody can come and use it. We recently got a change of occupancy for anybody to use this. If anybody's interested to use this space, it's open. I'm a member of the Castle Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that looks to basically enhance, renovate, and beautify the house, as well as educate the public about the house. We're in the middle of a capital campaign to raise $2 million. We put about $500,000 into this house. What I have back here is basically things that you can learn more about the house, so have fun with your phone. So there's a few of these sheets being passed around. I just want to go through some of these. We actually have a really neat 3D rendition of the house that was scanned. We had a laser scanning of the house, and it basically gives a 3D tour of the entire house. Right now, we mainly just give tours in the bottom floor, but this, if you go here, it'll allow you to actually see the rest of the house in great detail. This is our square here to learn more about the Castle Foundation, our 501c3. Our digital guest book, we'd love you to sign our digital guest book. Some of you may have heard about this event because of our email. We've gotten emails from anybody who visits the house, and we're always looking to put more into it so we can tell you about the event at the house. And for those of you who are, this is Instagram. I'm not savvy, so I don't know exactly. I've never used Instagram, but basically that's an Instagram account about the house. We have that set up. It talks a lot about some of the things that are going on in the house. So again, feel free to go and scan and learn more, and just to find out more about the house. So without further ado, one last thing. We do have a wireless guest signal being sent out, so if you want to sign into that, the password is Alpha Tau. So ALPHATAU, one word, all lowercase. So feel free to use that as well. How many of you, and I'm just curious, one last question we give it over to Don, but how many of you learned about this through, or how did you learn about this? Through like an email, for instance?
Email and the Troy Record.
Troy Record, okay.
Yeah, we made the front page.
Oh, well I assume that would have been pretty effective. Did most of everybody learn about this through the Troy Record?
No.
Okay.
No, the email.
As a reminder.
Just curious, how many people just walked in because they saw the sign?
I talked to her.
I was reminded that.
Everybody planned to be here.
Could I have seen it on Facebook?
What's that?
Could I have seen it on Facebook?
We have a Facebook page, so you
They're always pending this on Facebook pretty hard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, somebody got put it up.
Well, that depends on how you get it.
Okay, so, well, great. Well, again, welcome to the Payne Mansion, and I'm going to give it over to Don. And again, there's some refreshments in the back, so feel free to partake of those. Anybody have any questions about the house before I give it to Don?
George, can you show me how to get, I'm a Mac guy.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a lovely.
Yes, it
So,
is.
so where do the servants live, and how many servants might they have had?
Service is on the third floor in the back. There's definitely a butler and one servant lady. There may have been more, but we definitely know about those. The butler actually lived with so the original owner had his son take the house over. The butler lived with the John Payne Jr. until about 1945, and until like I think late 30s, and then he had it for a number of years after that, and then Russell Sage got it. So he actually had the house on it to his own for a few years. It's George the Butler, which was my name. So.
George the Butler.
And
Well,
it
not
was,
long.
and it was Greek.
The name was Greek. So yeah, this is go to now this is your,
Oh,
do you
wait,
prefer to go?
yeah.
That's what we're going to go to. Okay, and then we want to slideshow. Okay,
Good, thank you. Okay, so, this is something we're gonna try to do once a month. And we figured, the first Monday of every month might be a good time to do it, because nobody does anything on Monday nights, right? Most of the things that are going on are on the weekends. So we thought, well, let's try it, the first Monday of every month. We're calling it Cafe Yes, because no is not an option. Let's see if I can get this to work here. Hold on. So, what's our plan? The plan is to get this to work.
Get back.
Well, I can do it.
Yeah, she just.
Okay, so we're sort of modeling this after some successful attempts to bring people together for various things, like the Algonquin Round Table, which was George Kaufman's thing, or Franklin's Leather Apron Man, the Rope, 18th century French salons. The idea is to bring, smart people together and discuss whatever we discuss, have entertainment, and then do something instead of just talking, but try to put together some work parties to actually work on some projects. And Troy's got a lot of issues, as you probably know. And not just Troy, the whole capital district, but since we're doing this in Troy, we'll probably heavily favor Troy in some of the action projects we want to do. For example, and the other reason is to get out of the house once a month, especially after the last 2 years with COVID, right? So some of the projects that I'm thinking about are a complete photographic inventory of every building in Troy. Troy has lost a great deal of its history over the years, which we're going to show later too. And it's very easy for the city to allow historic buildings to get knocked down. RPI just knocked a few, some new ones up on the street.
Sage Ave.
Sage Avenue. So I think if we can at least do an inventory of every building, do some research, find out who lived in that building, create a computerized database for research purposes. We can learn more about not only the history of the city, but the history of the infrastructure as well. Because in Troy, one architecture student once told me that in Troy, I don't know if it's true today, but in Troy you could find almost any architectural style ever done in the world. You'll find some example of it in Troy. Now, again, I don't know if that's true now because they've torn so much down, but at least that used to be the way. Neighborhoods. Troy's got some real distinctive neighborhoods. And back in 1985, we went to each neighborhood and did sort of a session to find out what people were thinking about in those neighborhoods and trying to come up with some ideas to make the neighborhoods better. And it seems like not a lot's been happening in the last few years. So I'm thinking it would be nice if we could do specific workshops on each neighborhood, see what the people who live there, what they think are the problems, and then see if we can come up with some solutions, and then get people to do it. Bring back Prospect Park. Anybody here from Troy? Who grew up in Troy? Prospect Park is a jewel. It was a jewel. It was a jewel when it was made in 1909, done by the first black graduate of RPI. It had all kinds of things. It had a beautiful observation tower. It had a couple of buildings, a casino, museum. It had a gazebo. All kinds of things went on there. And it's kind of a ghost town now. And the pool, which most of us probably learned how to swim there when we were kids. There's only 4 of them in the world like this. This is it was designed by I forgot the person's name, but there's only 4 of these kind of pools. One's been restored, and there's 3 more. And we have a real jewel, and there's trees growing in it now. So I'd like to see that park come back to life. Right?
Don, what's so unusual about the pool? You said there's only 4 in the world?
Yeah, it was designed by this, I can't remember the fellow's name, but it's a patented pool. This guy designed this pool, and there's only 4 in existence. And one's been restored, and then we have one, I can't remember where the other two are. But we could do a whole show just on the pools, right? But anyways, Prospect Park is this jewel, it had a lake there, I mean, it was just this beautiful place. I did a whole book on it, it's called The History of Mount Ida. It's like 250 pages, I mean, there's so much history there. So that's a little bit, a Lost Arts project. Troy has still so much great historic stock, but you walk around the city and you'll see cast iron railings rusting away. You see a lot of the infrastructure. You go into some of the houses and the plaster work is falling down. I mean, you come in here and you kind of get an idea of what Troy was like during the Gilded Age. So what I'd like to do is create, and I know a lot of these people, for example, a blacksmith, somebody who knows how to do historic plaster work or tinsmithing, and create a group that you can go, like if you own a Troy house, a historic house, and you have plaster work that he's done, you can go and have a historic plaster work done. Or if you're missing pieces of your cast iron fence, that we have a blacksmith who can reproduce that and make it. So that's, I think, a really important, and again, it would bring the beauty of Troy back, right? Instead of walking down and seeing all this rusted iron. Historic markers, interpretive signage, there's some of that already, but heritage tourism is something that's sort of dear to my heart, and something that the Capital District just doesn't seem to get, and I'll show you why. 81% of U.S. tourists are considered cultural tourists. Okay? 56% of the population include at least one cultural, arts, historic, or heritage activity or event while they go on a trip. Cultural tourists spend more money than the average tourist. Right? They spend 60% more, over $1,000, versus a traditional tourist, which is $820. They take 3.6 trips versus 3.4 trips, which doesn't seem like a lot more, but it is. Anything, it's an increase. 40% of cultural tourists are affluent, well-educated baby boomers, no boomer. They prefer immersive experiences to enrich their life, prefer travel that's educational, and 40% will pay more for distinctive lodging. Because I think that's part of your thing here, right, George? Is to rent rooms here, yeah. And millennials are a growth market. I mean, I guess they have some value. 74% want to engage in a destination's arts and cultural assets, while 2/3 really think authenticity is important. And then, again, when you look at Troy, you look at the whole Capital District. This is where American history began, all right? The first, Native Americans have been here for thousands of years, but the first Europeans came here in 1614, all right? Well, 1609, when Henry Hudson sort of founded the place. But 1614, Adrian Block and a bunch of his sailors moved up to where Albany is today on what was an island then, we now call the Port of Albany, and built the first European settlement, which was Fort Orange. And that was the beginning of Albany. That was the beginning of European presence in America, and what we call America. And if you study the history of the Capital District, you can find somebody from Troy, Albany, Schenectady, in almost every major American historical event. That's how important this area is. And yet, when you try to get government interested in preserving the history, it's been a real struggle. Okay? And that's what we're going to talk about today, particularly during the urban renewal period, when they literally excised huge parts of Albany, Schenectady, and Troy just out. And in the 1980s, if we had Google Earth, and you looked at a satellite picture of Troy, it looked like a meteorite had hit Troy. Literally was a hole, a 9-foot hole with a fence around it. It looked like we got hit by a meteor. And it was that way for years before they tried to do anything about it. And as you see, they still didn't do much about it. So that's my rant about heritage tourism. But it's the #1 industry in America. And almost any part of American history that you want to explore, you can find in the Capital District. Troy with its iron history, with its collar industry, with cast iron stoves and bell making. You go to Schenectady and GE, and almost everything we take for granted was invented there, from lights to lasers, to refrigerators. to almost everything you take for granted today was invented in a GE lab in Schenectady. Okay? And Albany, they invented perforated toilet paper, so they got something. And some other things too. But again, the Capital District just has a tremendous amount of history and needs to be promoted because heritage tourism people come, they drop their money, and they go. It's not like, where you have to build a lot of stuff with it. They want to come and see our history. And yet, we keep knocking it down. Every time, when I worked for the Troy Record back in the last century, every week I tried to give the city an idea. I presented an idea about take the old horseshoe buildings in South Troy, turn it into a Quincy Market, or take this building and do that. And every time I did, what did they do? They either burned the building or tore it down. So there's a real disengagement with, people appreciate the history, but the politics seems to not, and that's been a real conflict. That was more than I wanted to talk about that, but anyway. So what are we going to do? Well, every month is going to be different. We've invited Pulitzer Prize-winning poets, New York Times best-selling authors, the last of the Beat Generation's poets, Charlie Plumell, who's up in Cherry Valley. We're going to have short plays, documentaries, film, original music and poetry, special guests from the past, lectures, workshops, whatever we come up with, whatever we think people would be interested in, that's what we're going to do. So every month will be different. Okay? This is an experiment. We'll see what happens. It may be a big flop. It may be a big success, right? But we're going to try it. That's all you can do is try. So today, what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to see an excerpt from Dietrich Rides Again, which is an acclaimed one-woman show by Justina Kostic. She has this great show about the famous actors in Marlene Dietrich. Then we're going to show a film called What Do You Tear Down Next, which was a 1964 documentary, just when they started tearing down Troy, Albany, and Schenectady, the beginning of the urban renewal period. And Bern Forrester starred in that. He was an architect, professor at RPI. And Todd Fabozzi is here somewhere. Todd?
Yeah.
I invited Todd. You still work for the regional planning commission, right? So Todd and I are going to talk about. Well, Todd's going to be more talking because he works for regional planning, and kind of talk about what's going on today in the Capital District in terms of, urban renewal, preservation, restoration, that kind of thing. And then we're going to have a special guest who's going to. Actually, it's a little late, but she'll be here later. And she's coming up from the South. She was in Troy in 1860, so she's got a special story to tell. So I just want to thank the people, especially the people at Peggy Castle for letting us do this. George, Kim, Jim, Paul, and I'm sure I forgot one.
Darlene.
Yes, Darlene. And to Justina, Lila, Colleen, who couldn't stay but brought the refreshments, and Gina back here for helping put this together, because this is going to be a monumental project. There's some big stuff that I can't talk about that we're going to do, but when we're at that point, I think you'll be happy about it. So we have some big plans, okay? And then we have our first sponsors, Clement Frame and Shop and Art Delegates. Anybody here had anything framed from?
I have.
Yeah. So they're the best, right? I went to school with Tom, and that's Tom right there. Tom is on his brother Art.
You're also open for any
I'm sorry, Ray.
sponsors
Yeah,
as
no,
well.
my head. Ray, I'm sorry. Yes, Ray.
We're also,
And Bob.
we are also opening for any other sponsors as well. It's very low cost wise. We will be advertising in many ways. We're just kind of starting out and kicking this off. But if you're interested, you can speak with myself or Dan.
Yeah, so because we want to bring some big names in here, and this is a free event, but we want to be able to pay at least for transportation, maybe a small honorarium for some of the big names to get them down here, okay, to get them to come to Troy. So that's So that's sort of the plan, okay? So our first guest is direct from New York City. Dietrich Rides Again. It's a critically acclaimed show. Justina Kostic portrays Marlene Dietrich. She's accompanied by pianist Malcolm Kogut. And Justina was born in Poland. She came here, actually at 18, she started her own theater company in Denmark. And she performed all over Europe at between 18 and 21. But you know, if you're going to do theater, there's only one place you got to go, and that's Broadway, right? That's America, that's New York. So at 21, she came to America. And we met in 2014. And I was so impressed with her. And I had this play that I had for probably 10 years, Helen of Troy, New York. It was George Kaufman's second play. And it was a spoof on the Troy collar industry. And it was a big hit in New York City. It went around to 121, I think it was 121 shows. It traveled around the country. It never played in Troy because it was a spoof of the collar bosses, and the collar bosses ran Troy. So they wouldn't let it play here. But 80 years later, we got revenge. And Justina and I co-directed it. She actually started it too. And we had 6 sold-out performances here. And this was 2015, I think it was. And we're going to do it again. It was a big hit. People keep asking us to do it again, and we will. It's a big project, though. And she played the male French photographer. So her one-woman show on Marlene Dietrich was and is a big hit in the city until COVID, of course, closed Broadway down for the last 2 years. So nothing really was going on in New York. But she's here today to do an excerpt from her one-woman show. All right, so let's bring her in. Welcome, Malcolm, and Justina.
That's the only thing I've plenty of. Baby, dream a while, scheme a while. You're sure to find happiness, and I guess all the things you've always pined for. Gee, I'd like to see you looking swell, baby. Diamond bracelets Woolworth doesn't sell, baby, till that lucky day you are the one, baby. I can't give you anything but love. My first performance at the Black Cat Cabaret. Well, that was exhausting. But more exhausting was explaining to all these men why I gave a flower to that woman in the audience in the 1920s. I'm a gentleman at heart, I would always say. But the truth was so many women entered my heart at this very dangerous time. At the time when women were better than men, that you couldn't live with women. I tried to live with a woman once. Greta Garbo was her name. Her underwear were constantly dirty. Swedish women never wash their pants. Did you know that? I washed my hands, but the participation in this romance was no longer convenient. After all, I'm the laziest girl in town. Nothing ever worries me. No one ever hurries me. I take pleasure leisurely, even when I kiss. But when I kiss, they want some more, and wanting more becomes a bore. It isn't worth the fighting for. finishing spray from Faust by Goethe at the Max Reinhardt Theater. Ah, look down, the rich in sorrow's crown, with the grace of thy dear face, upon the wall in which I drown, with pierced heart and cruel smart, thou seest the death of him thine own. You got the job, Miss Dietrich. You may start tomorrow in my cabaret. Keep it! My poor heart is aching, bring home the bacon, and if I'm alone and forsaken, it's simply because, it's simply because I'm the laziest girl in town. I'm just lazy, you know. After that performance, I discovered a movie script for the Blue Angel on my vanity. American movie film director Joseph von Sternberg came to see my performance at the Black Hat Cabaret. But what part is there for me? I thought to myself. Well, I would have never imagined that I would be cast as the main character. So I did not bring the naughty song that Joseph von Sternberg requested to the audition. Instead, I sang this little American song. You got a cream in my coffee? You have a great way, an up-to-date way of telling me you would love me. It gives me such a thrill. I know it always will. My head is turning, and just from learning your estimation of me. And as for you, I'll say, I feel the self-same way. You the cream in my coffee, you the salt in my stew. You will always be my necessity, I will assume. Was ist das? That's not the tempo. Yeah. You the scorch in my collar, you the glaze in my shoe. You will always be my necessity. I'd be lost without. This is jazz, mister, not a Viennese waltz. Play it. You the sail of my love boat, you the captain and crew. You will always be my necessity. I belong about nine. We have a job here. I have a job. You have a job. You do your job. Yeah. This is the kind of quatch that we all had to sing back then, just to get a role. And they didn't even know how to play it. But from time to time, I got to sing in my own way. You know the way. You are the cream in my coffee. You are the salt in my stew. You will always be my necessity. I'd be lost without you. You are the starch in my collar. You are the lace in my shoe. You will always be my necessity. I'd be lost without you. Most men tell of tales, and each phrase of tales prefer each known way, but this way is my own way. You are the sail of my love boat. You are the captain and crew. You will always be my necessity. I'd be lost without you. Incredibly, Mr. von Sternberg liked my song, and I was cast as the main character, Lola Lola, who just can't help falling in love over and over again. Eine rätselhafte Schima, ein je ne sais pas quoi, liegt in den Augen immer bei einer schönen Frau. Doch wenn sie meine Augen bei einem Vis-à-vis ganz tief in seine Saugen verschwinden sie. Ich bin von Kopf bis Fuß Liebe eingestellt, denn das ist meine Welt und sonst gar nicht. Denn das ist, was du nicht machen, meine Natur. Ich kann heute lieben nur und sonst gar nicht. Männer und schwierig wie Motten oder schlicht. Und wenn sie verbrennen, ja dafür kann ich nicht. Ich bin von Kopf bis Fuß Liebe eingestellt, denn das ist meine Welt und sonst gar nicht. I often stop and wonder why I appeal to men. Too many times I blunder in love and out again. They offer me devotion. I like it, I confess. When I reflect emotion, there is no need to guess. I am falling in love again. Never wanted to. What am I to do? I can't help it. Love's always been my game. Play it how I may. I was made that way. I can't help it. Men cluster to me like moths around the flame. And if their wings burn, I know I'm not to blame. I am falling in love again, never wanted to. What am I to do? I can't. I just can't help it. By Mr. Joseph von Sternberg. He taught me so much about lighting. I, unlike many other Hollywood movie stars, was very interested in the technical aspects of making movies. But as some of you know, Joseph von Sternberg was a Jew. So the German film industry refused to work with him. So I refused to work with him. I was not going to be married to Germany in its present state. Look me over closely. Tell me what you see. A lady likes to look her best before she pours the tea. You see a diamond-studded gown. makes the evening sun go down. So look me over closely, tell me what you find, but don't get over anxious, 'cause I'm not the marrying kind. There was no place for me in Germany anymore. My own country has betrayed me like nobody ever has. It has betrayed itself. So when you come and see me, don't try to change my ways. You have a part within my heart, and there you'll always stay. There's room for all, there's love for all, but please don't blame me if you fall. So look me over closely, and then make up your mind. But darling, please remember this, I'm holding you before we kiss. So look me over closely, 'cause I'm not the marrying kind. Thank you, everyone. This was an excerpt from Detroit. Again, my name is Justina Kostek, Malcolm Kogut. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Marlene. I mean, Justina. Okay. So, what did they tear down? We're going to talk specifically about Troy. Who here, anybody here grew up in Troy? How many people here have grown up in Troy? Okay. So some of this you will remember.
I'm going to try not to cry.
Yeah. For the rest of you, this, well, you'll see. All right. It started in the early 60s and 70s, right? People are familiar with the Uncle Sam Atrium. More than 69 buildings were destroyed to build the wall. Okay. It covered a whole square block from 3rd Street to Fulton to 4th Street and to Broadway. And it included the Griswold Opera House right there, which was a well-known opera house. There were 3 department stores. It was Frears, Woolworths, I think that was Green. There were jewelry stores. There were shoe stores. There were eateries. Again, almost 70 buildings in this block, this square block area, were torn down, okay, to build the atrium, which if you've been in the atrium today, you realize not much going on there. But one thing you'll notice in most of these pictures that I show is people, cars and people. And I grew up in Troy. In the 60s and 70s, on a weekend, if you wanted to walk down the street in Troy, you literally had to walk in the middle of the road because the streets were packed with people. There were 8 department stores within 2 blocks. This is what it looks like now. And that little bulldozer is sitting right there. You know, people in glass cages don't buy things.
What is that?
That's the atrium. That's the Uncle Sam Atrium. That was supposed to be what do they call it? It's a mall.
Mall?
Yes. There was a name for it, because most malls are suburban malls, and this was sort of
Inner city.
yeah, inner city mall. I'm not going to blame the guy who actually built it. He thought he was doing the right thing. They had torn these buildings down. Again, during this urban renewal period, the federal government gave a lot of money to tear things down, but nobody asked the other question. What do I do after we tear the buildings down? You're going to give us money to put stuff up? And of course, the answer was no. And this was they were trying to compete this was the exodus in the 50s and the 60s. People were leaving the cities for the suburbs, right? And you had Colony Center, for example, which was an early mall. And so the business community and politicians were trying to figure out, well, how do we compete with this? How can we stop people from leaving the city? Oh, I know. Let's tear down the old buildings and we'll put up a mall, which was a disastrous idea. And even in this design, because a well-known developer at the time, Lou Swire, who built Stuyvesant Plaza, and if anybody's been at Stuyvesant Plaza, you know it's one of the most successful sort of mini malls or shopping centers in the country. And he said to Troy, he says, don't do it. He says, do not build a two-story mall in this part of the city. It will not survive. And they said, well, you know, you're not a Trojan. Get out of here. So they ignored it. And of course, they built the mall. And it was a disaster. And it's still a disaster. From busy streets to ghost town. So this is the same area where the mall is here. This is in 65, here's the 1890s. This is what it looks like today. So if you see anybody walking down the street, you know, it's kind of a rarity. Now, Troy's come back a lot since these days. It's really actually doing a lot better now. I'm not knocking what's going on in Troy. There is a resurgence in Troy. There are people moving up from the city and other places, young people that are finding Troy a great walkable city, a place that they want to live in and raise their children. And I always said, when I see the Quackenbush department store back in action and I see women pushing baby carriages, that I'm hopeful for Troy. And I've seen that's what's going on now. So I'm very, even though this is going to be kind of depressing, I'm still pretty optimistic about where Troy's headed, especially if it continues what it's doing now. But this is what happens: is you have these vibrant, downtown streets just packed full of people and stores, and then you get this. It's a ghost town. This is the south side of the atrium. This was the Troy Times building. That's the original post office. But again, you see people, and then you see here now, nobody. And this is the east side. All around the atrium, the cancer spread. All right, this is, you can see, these were residences, there were stores here. The College Inn is now, well, it was Dempsey's when my father used to go there. What's it called now? The Bradley, right? So this side is somewhat operating. There's not a lot going on here. But again, this was the east side before they built the mall. Lots of stuff going on, lots of people, a lot of people living downtown, lots of stores, places to go. Not so much now. And then this is the north side. This is Freer's department store is the only thing that really is left that didn't get torn down, although they wanted to. And this is Freer's annex, but that did come down. Okay? That's what it looks like today. Okay? So the whole block around where they built the mall literally died, slowed down. But that's nothing compared to when they decided to go a little further north, from Market Block to Franklin Square, okay, which is the area from Fulton, 4th, and River Street, and then up to where the Grand Island Bridge is. They literally took down about 150 buildings. Basically in the heart of downtown Troy, the shopping district. But not only this, but all of this, all the way down to the river. So this is Franklin Square on sort of the north end, and that was the Triangle building, and that's 4th Street, that's River Street. The only thing left is the manufacturer's bank. So you can see all of this gone. And that's it today. That's what it looks like today. So this is River Street from the Market Block. That building's still there. And this is the east side of River Street. That's the west side. And again, you can see what was down here? Kresge's. What was those?
Florsheim Shoes.
There were, I'm trying to remember all the buildings that were here. But again, department stores, 5 and Dimes. restaurants, shoe stores, jewelry stores. This is the west side. This was the Troy Theater, which was a beautiful theater, torn down. Again, you see, yeah, I mean, the theater went all the way to the river. So if you went to the men's room, while you're standing in the urinal, you looked out still onto the river. It was kind of a nice view. That's what it looks like today. Okay, so you see all this, and that's what we have today. And, I'll keep that. This is Franklin Square, which is sort of the north end, to Chatham Square. What you notice about Troy is that all the squares are triangles. So I guess they weren't very good with geometry. But this whole area, if anyone is familiar with Lucian Burley, Burley was this famous photographer. He made these panoramic views of cities in the 19th century, all over the country, mostly New York State. But this was where he made them right there. The Green Island Bridge is about right here. Okay. So again, this is the north end of Franklin going into Chatham Square. This is Chatham Square. Okay, there's the triangle building that starts Franklin Square. And then all these buildings, this is it now. Literally hundreds and hundreds of buildings. That's looking north from Franklin Square. So Chatham Square, all those buildings should be here. The Green Island Bridge is right here. Okay, all came down. And the question is, why? I mean, were you going to replace it with something? No. They just tore them down. They had the money to tear them down, and nobody said, are you going to give us money to build something up? So urban renewal wasn't urban renewal at all, it was urban removal. And I just look, this is King Street. But I just like to show this, because this is the Manufacturers Bank, and if you're familiar with the Civil War, the battle between the USS Monitor and the Confederate Merrimack, that was financed by Trojans, by two in particular. And that deal was signed in this bank. And the room where this is signed is actually, it was taken out when they tore this building down. They took it out and they put it in the new Manufacturers Bank, which is today is called Franklin Plaza, which is ironic because Franklin Plaza is gone. This is the other end of Franklin Square, which we call the Market Block. Again, Peerless, Denby's, the Mayflower, the theater. It was just, one department store after another. You could buy anything in Troy. People came from all over the Capital District to come and shop in Troy because there was everything here. This is it today. And then Troy was a train, it was a train city. The trains literally ran through the city. And Union Station was sort of the gem. It was the centerpiece of the railroad. You could go anywhere in America from the Troy Station. Okay. And this is the interior. They tore that down. They replaced it with what's called the Raddick Building, right? Social services. So this is on the footprint of this. Okay. Every 20 minutes you could hop on a train and go around the Capital District. It's called the Beltline. And it's ironic because the CDTA calls their route the Beltline, right? But you could go anywhere on a train, just from walking down Broadway into Troy. The reason why I know so much about the train system is because my father was the head of he was the platform manager for the Railroad Express Agency. And so I spent many a day in and playing around the train station. But what a lot of people don't know is that if you wanted to go north, there were 7 or 8 tracks. Today it's called 6th Avenue, but there were 7 or 8 different tracks. You didn't want to walk through over the tracks to get to the northbound. So you literally go down the subway. So there's 2 trains. So you'd go down here and walk into the subway, walk all the way under the 6 and 7 different tracks, and then come up and get on the platform to go north. That's still here. That's still there. Yeah, they didn't implode that. They imploded the train tunnel, which is over here, between Congress and Ferry. This is now 6th Avenue, okay? So all of this is just now a road. that you travel. And again, unless you grew up in Troy, you don't know that. But even, again, along here were houses. There were houses everywhere in Troy. Okay? Although I wouldn't want to live here because when there was all steam engines, people used to hang out their clothing. So, kind of hard to keep it clean. But what I'd like to do is open this up and make it like an underground restaurant. I think that would be kind of cool. I wanted to do that with the train tunnel, but RPI kind of destroyed that when you built the student housing. But again, to show you the station, I think this is when Truman came, but the train was the centerpiece of Troy. You could, if you lived in South Troy, the train literally ran through the city. We used to play when we were kids. We used to go in the tunnel and wait for the train to come around. It would blow its whistle, then we'd run like hell to get all the way down and not get run over. But you can get an idea, again, of the size and scope of the train system here. Okay, there's the station there. This is Broadway right here. This is going into the tunnel, which is on Congress Street here. Again, this is now just a road, and the tunnel's all filled in. And this is looking south. This is from the track switcher. And everything you see here is gone. There's nothing here. You would never know there was a train in the city. And complete neighborhoods were literally ripped from the city. Congress Street, Ferry Street, 8th Street, Ferry Street, 5th, 6th, 7th Avenues, and on and on and on. This is the top of Congress Street looking down towards the city. Okay? And actually there's another street right here. It's called Ferry Street. Not the Ferry Street you go up now. This is the original Ferry Street. Okay? This was all taken down. This is another view of it. I used to live right there in that building. These were all Greek Revival, Federal Period buildings. These were beautiful buildings in great shape. There was like no reason to knock them down. And this is what it looks like today. Totally ruined. And this is just another view. This is what's called Short 7. That's my Uncle Frank's house. That's me standing on what was left to it after they tore it down. And that's Ferry Street, the original Ferry Street. You still see buildings there, and there's a car there. But this is all gone. All of the buildings on that part of Ferry Street, you don't even know there's a Ferry Street there. It's gone. All the buildings are gone, the street's gone, everything. The sewers are probably still under the road. That's about it. That's the retaining wall from there. So these were all buildings that were in great shape. They weren't deteriorated. They weren't slums. They were all in good shape. You had, middle class, middle class people living in these buildings, and they tore them down. Nobody asked the question why. What are you going to do after you tear them down? And then finally, this is just Fulton Street. I went downtown. This is from 8th Street, up where RPI is, and sort of that's it now. So you literally have neighborhoods that were just taken out from 8th Street all the way down to downtown. 8th Street, 7th Avenue, 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue. And some of the buildings in, for example, on 5th Avenue, some of the brownstones, you couldn't even, they're like this, you couldn't even build them today. You couldn't afford it unless you were Bill Gates.
Question, were residents?
Huh?
Were residents
The fifth-
evicted?
Displaced.
Well, did they use anything? I think they did.
A lot of it was eminent domain, yeah, you were bought out.
Oh, you were buying?
And you never got what the buildings were worth,
Right, of
obviously.
course.
Just like they did in South Mall.
Yeah, well.
When they did that, they just gave you,
Uh-huh.
what they considered it was worth. But the buildings on Fifth Avenue, I remember, that kind of began the historic preservation movement in New York State. Because there were people that said, why are you tearing this down? And that got enough people pissed that you started seeing people go, all right, enough already. But right across the street here, where in 1978 is really when preservation interest got going in Troy. Because right next door at 52, the last building right before the parking lot right here, the bank manager of the Troy Savings Bank wanted to tear that building down so he could park his Cadillac, which is, you know, a beautiful 19th century building. And the person who lived there was an RPI professor, Bill Brower. He said, well, tell you what. And enough people in Troy decided that's enough. And the first demonstration against knocking buildings down took place. We picketed the savings bank. People took money out of there, and the building's still standing. So that was the first real preservation attempt, and it was a success. I can't say that for the rest of Troy, but that was the first.
What year?
That was 1978, I think it was around 78 with the building here. Of course, you know, the bank's gone, right? So the building outlasted the bank and that manager. So that's just, so that, you know, again, I just wanted to give an overview, because what we're going to see now is a documentary that was, oh, well, I guess I ended with that. This is the Franklin Plaza area. That's Grand Division. The bridge is up in here. And, you know, that's what happened, which is literally one of the bulldozers destroyed all of them. So that's the result. Vern Forster was a professor at RPI, School of Architecture. As you could say, he was there from 54 until 71, then left in 71. And he just died, you know, in 2010. But he took part in this documentary called "What Do You Tear Down Next?" And it was just the beginning of the urban renewal, you know, programs in the country, but in this case, in particular, in Albany, Schenectady, and Troy. And this was done by National Education TV, which I guess is PBS today, considered PBS. So he came back in 2004 to give a talk, and he gave me a copy of this documentary. Now, this documentary was in really bad shape. I mean, you could barely see it, and you could barely hear it. But a friend of mine, Chris Gruner, who used to head Spectrum News, took it and he massaged it, and so it's in much better shape now. So you can at least see it and hear it, and you know, get the story. So that's what we're going to show now. It's only 29 minutes, and then Todd can talk about what's happening now in the Capital District in terms of planning or demolition, and then we'll go from there. Oh, that's the wrong thing. George, how do I get to the?
Oh, one second. What did you want?
I want to get to the documentary.
They were going to do that and did a lot of that in New York too. Jonathan Mouse has actually cut the 12th century and some of that really important.
We're going to see South Troy and Surrounding and Schenectady. Vicksburg.
You know, you can see it's a rundown neighborhood, but we don't see the sense in putting any money in your house anymore. They tear a place down as fast as you try to fix it up, it doesn't pay anymore.
Ain't that a good question? Sure, what's happening to Troy when they're knocking all these houses down?
Well, I don't know. There's been so many people that have been thrown out of their homes and everything. It's just something that, well, I just feel sorry. I don't know. I hardly dare to drive a nail here because I'm afraid they'll come up the next morning and tell us they're going to take the house.
Well, I would find a cup in him, find a bulldozer, not tourist that.
bulldozer and redevelopment are the wonder drugs, it seems, in the treatment of our urban disease. They are changing the face and personality of our cities without risk of any alarming side effects. People may grumble and sometimes lament, but the bulldozers can crash on with full confidence that no matter what they do, there will be no massive public outcry. There is apathy in our cities, and capital is being made of it. Out of the ruins will rise a round 21-story tower for whom the aged. And if the change calls for adjustment on the part of the elderly citizens, well, they'll get used to it in time.
It's going to be kind of hard to get them used to, I think, 21 stories high, but it's the modern age and everybody has to go along with progress, and I imagine after they're in it a while that they'll do all right, they'll get used to it.
Will it be elevators? They've got to run themselves and things like that. The average old person wouldn't want not like that either. I suppose they get used to it in time, but don't my son just said from time to time, are you taking all of this in that I'm saying? Right? Oh, boy. Well, I hope you're not going to take my picture. I'll murder you. My son has said from time to time, by the time they got this straightened out here, they'd want this side of the street for a supermarket, so you see, we're not sure just what's going to happen.
That's true.
No, nobody knows around here. I've been here almost 40 years. Ooh. And I feel sorry to see so many of these nice houses, which were nice. It must have cost a bit of money to put them up, and still they've all been taken down. And I realize that progress must go on, but sometimes I think they overdo it.
Everything goes in this section of Troy, but the bowling alley.
That's attractive.
We're clearing about 100 acres here in Albany to make way for a complex of state structures that will stand out as a vital monument to the history, dynamism, distinction, and power of our state.
We cleared about 16 acres around the city hall here in Schenectady a while back. We had a redevelopment plan all set to go, but we stopped it to do some reconsidering.
Here are 3 neighboring cities in upstate New York with problems that are duplicated across the country. Troy has been losing population for 60 years along with its industry. Its economy today is tied to several private schools and colleges. Can a change in skyline solve its problems? Albany is increasingly concerned with an economy tied to state government employment. Will it be healthier when it becomes a Brasilia on the Hudson? And Schenectady's fortunes are precariously tied to those of its single industry. Is this city being wise to stop a moment to reconsider its program of renewal? Architecture students today are learning that existing useful and attractive buildings should be preserved. And they are learning that new buildings must not be isolated monuments to the architect or his clients, but must relate to their surroundings. The growing responsibility of architects to society is being stressed by professors like Barrett Forster at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy.
Cities necessarily change. New buildings are needed, and some old structures have to come down. But the new construction does not rise in a vacuum. Each building is affected by its neighbors, and in turn, it affects them.
Modern life makes new demands, and the constant changes require new construction. Sometimes the old and the new enhance each other, and sometimes they conflict. At other times, the contrast provides excitement and even unexpected appeal. There are no rules, but there is a problem that demands judgment and taste. Maintaining ordinary buildings that serve their functions. Even in the most beautiful cities, undistinguished buildings predominate. A town benefits from having a large number of unobtrusive structures. They provide a neutral background to set off the landmarks. If too many buildings scream for attention, none can be heard. There is value in keeping old buildings in a good state of repair and to allow them to lend character to a community. The familiar helps to give us a sense of being at home. Sometimes these structures can be put to new uses. A gas house could be converted into a theater in the round, a mill into an old age home. In a planned commercial district, this station could be saved. Its tall interior might become a shopping arcade. All cities need a touch of past grandeur. There is stark beauty in the simplicity of a row of mill hands' cottages. Few could now afford to build the spaciousness of older residences. These buildings deserve better than this and would repay our appreciation and respect. Not many cities can boast of a private park surrounded with fine old residences and then be complacent about the decay of the buildings while the privacy of the park is preserved. Only a few people own keys to the park or use it anymore. The park is not for the children, although a school is housed beside it. The usefulness of a park changes with the times, and adaptations can be made to new demands. Thus, the values of established open spaces could be increased. The city might buy this area to make it available for public use. Land for parks in the downtown sections of all our cities is too hard to come by to allow such opportunities to be missed. It is far worse if open space is withdrawn from the central city. Its absence chases city dwellers to the suburbs and customers to outlying shopping centers. The loss of the downtown park can cause public concern, and rightly so.
As parks go, it's a pretty poor one, but they don't seem to have much else. So why take it away?
Well, I think this park here, is a home for a lot of elderly people in the city here. It's a spot where people can pause, rest while they're doing their shopping.
Well, I think since they've always had it, they should keep it here because it's where the people come. Well, I feel that this is public property and it should remain such. It has been sold, as you know, at a very small price to a Roman Catholic church. Well, I think it's all right in this way. I was talking with a Jewish girl, and I said I didn't care if it was a synagogue or a Protestant Lutheran church or a Catholic church. It was going to be God's house, and I was in favor.
And I do have a feeling about the park.
I feel as though a good many people that have room have no place to go, and they just have a room to their home. And the summertime is lovely for them. They enjoy it very much. And it was taken away that I missed it.
But as we move away from the city core, we find other neglected opportunities. The vacant lots that abound in all our cities seem only to become dumping grounds for debris. Seldom does anyone think what they might be, even if only temporarily. With a little effort and imagination, the vacant lots in our neighborhoods could become playgrounds. Public spirit, mower and rake could give a neighborhood a new lease on life. Beauty, order, and utility are not the only criteria for deciding what should be destroyed. We asked several people in Troy how they would feel if the monument which dominates the center of the city were replaced by a small park, a tree or two, a fountain, and some benches.
You're not sentimental about the monument? No, not at all. I think it's a hideous thing.
Well, I still felt very strongly about it, but having some real historical interest, I would see no objection to it.
But some people do feel very strongly about it, although not because of the historical interest.
I've played at this monument since I was a small kid, and it seems to me that it wouldn't be natural for me to walk by this section and not see it. It's no thing to take for granted. It's really a very beautiful, I think a very beautiful monument, and very impressive.
And would you prefer a little park instead of a monument?
Oh, no. No. I really don't go along with changes anyway. We're used to that monument here in Troy, and it's really what we have. Beautiful. It's really beautiful. We have our services there on Memorial Day. Yes, every Memorial Day after the parade.
Few people, however, would decry the abandonment of some other monuments that our cities have in abundance. A forest of signs defeats the purpose for which individual signs were put up, and restraint would be more pleasant and more effective. Most of the clutter that gives the appearance of a slum is merely on the surface and could be removed in order to reveal good buildings. The fine residences in this older neighborhood are occupied and maintained. Nevertheless, they are threatened. Exceptions in residential zoning can destroy the morale of the city. Every homeowner knows that tomorrow it may be his turn. This is the site of an historic residence.
The founder of Lansingburg.
And what about our waterfronts, our rivers and our streams that beckoned us in the beginning and said, "Come, build your cities here beside us."
I come from haunts of coot and hern. I make a sudden sally and sparkle out among the fern to bicker down a valley. I chatter as I flow to join the brimming river, for men may come and men may go, but I go on forever.
This stream originally had great beauty, but unfortunately, cities tend to neglect their waterfronts. I find this view both disheartening and encouraging. Disheartening because of the existing decay and neglect, and heartening because of the dream of what this area might be.
I see the opportunity for a nice, attractive residential area making use of an unpolluted stream.
For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever.
The potential of our waterfronts as a source of pleasure has been completely ignored. We convert them into dumping grounds, and after we destroy their beauty, we leave the view to parked cars.
We live in a throwaway civilization. We use things and we discard them, and we don't seem to care very much where. I know of no animal that follows its nest to the degree that we do. And once deterioration has set in, it becomes very difficult to reverse the trend. The first little bit of litter that we allow to remain is like a germ from where the disease spreads until an entire neighborhood is engulfed in depressing surroundings that affect our emotions and all our lives and actions.
There's only much we can do about it. Some people are very lax about their property. They just don't care, I suppose.
You know, work hard to keep the house looking nice and clean. I mean, they just have apartments next door, and since it's been made into apartments, they just don't seem to care.
When does the apathy set in? How does it all begin? It begins on a street when the paint begins to peel. It begins when one house in a neighborhood is allowed to go to ruin. It begins when bad judgment in remodeling is tolerated. It begins when inappropriate materials appear like tail fins on a horse-drawn carriage. It begins when imitation coverings are resorted to in the hope of stalling decay. And soon, the only remedy is the bulldozer, it would seem. But slums are man-made. They could also be man-prevented. Does it really have to come to this? Right in this same Tri-City area, in an old section of downtown Schenectady, known as the Stockade area, a most encouraging development is taking place that might hold a lesson for other neighborhoods. A few years back, this section was earmarked for destruction to make way for public housing. Despite the threat, some courageous citizens set out to prove that even a slum can be restored. One by one, houses were fixed up. Slowly, more people recognized the possibilities and advantages of restoration and maintenance. The recovered area includes many city blocks now, constantly expanding, bringing with it a community spirit wherever it spreads and a sense of identity.
the most interesting thing about this area is the fact that the people have done it themselves. Namely, we have received no aid, federal or otherwise. We do not want it. It has been largely by example. Namely, the person next door to a house that is being restored, repaired, or even freshly painted is inspired to go ahead and fix his own up.
In less than 10 years, the neighborhood has completely reversed itself. Pride is proving to be infectious.
I moved there last year, about this place last year, and I'm in the process of remodeling the outside. I've been working on the inside, and for a long time I tried to work on this way. It took me about 4 or 5 years of looking. I finally found this place, and I love it very much. And I've been working ever since. Just try to clean up.
Involvement seems to be the cure for apathy.
It's sad that everybody takes care of their own house. One does something, another one improves, and everybody goes along and gets each other out if we can. And that's the way it goes.
Yes, it was. I believe the worst looking house and the worst condition of any house on Green Street when I come in here. The roof was leaking, everything was shot. There was no paint and clapboards on the other side where the sun hit. Very well, walked up, I had to tear them all off and replace that. I put new siding all over the whole side on the other side. They built onto this house in the back. After the house had settled a little bit, it was about 4 inches out of plumb. They built on the back and they built 2 stories on there. And where they built on there, after the house had settled, they built a plumb on where they built on. And when I come to take the clapboards off, it was about 3 or 4 inches out of whack on the upper corner there. I had to line the whole thing up and build it up. It was a lot of work.
In the beginning, it was not easy to get financing for crumbling houses, but that has all changed now.
We've had such pleasant experiences with the bank on this house. When we first bought it, it was had recently been a 6-family cold water slum dwelling. We thought our only thought was just to make it habitable. When we started uncovering the really pretty timbers and beams that there are in this place, we realized we wanted to spend more money than we originally thought. We went back to the bank, asked them to redo the mortgage, and they couldn't have been pleasanter. I think they understood that we were trying to do something that was pretty special.
Not all houses were historical treasures. Many were neither old nor attractive, but they were remodeled, and the existing variety became a great asset to the neighborhood.
This house, which I restored about 3 or 4 years ago, was built in 1906. It was very badly run down at the time, and I think that what I've done shows that a little imagination and effort can make a very beautiful house out of what is normally, as this one was, a very ugly and run-down piece of property.
It can be done, and the results bring character and continuity to our cities that demolition cannot provide.
The wrecking ball and the bulldozer are often misused in our attempts to solve the problems of our cities.
It is good to remember that improvements can be just as catching as neglect.
I've been longing to get this for a couple of months. I just love the old house, love to polish it up, live in it.
Driving down here because I'm just waiting on someone up the next morning and told us they're going to take the house.
We'll have to find a bulldozer, not doing that.
So that last few minutes was a Schenectady stockade, which 50 years ago was slums.